at the end of the day, if Hamas isn't disarmed, all of this deal, the only thing that it will have achieved is the return of Israeli hostages. And that's no small thing, but that is not what Israel went to war for. And if we are left with that, I think that the clock is ticking for us to go back to war. And a conference like this is not a good sign for what it means in reality for Gazans and for Israelis.
What do you mean by the clock is ticking to go back to war? What kind of timeframes are you looking at?
I mean, to me, it's obvious that where reality is going now isn't towards anything that is acceptable for Israel.
What are the latest updates from Qatar and Gaza? Check out this great clip over here with Jonathan Conrica speaking on Israel I-20 News. So we'll watch the clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Just heart-wrenching to hear the family of Rangaveli waiting and knowing how much this means to the country right now. And at the same time, there's a push for this phase 2 of this peace plan, Donald Trump's peace plan, to kick off. Your sense of this moment right now?
Yeah, obviously the family is probably also aware that their beloved son and family member is being used for political purposes by various different parties to the conflict here. And that is something that is, of course, delaying his return. Before the first stage was implemented, we knew that Hamas was going to struggle to find all of the hostages that they murdered. We knew that there were going to be delays. We also knew that Hamas would use this for psychological warfare. And they have done exactly that. They've handed over remains that were not of Israeli bodies. They've delayed. They've done lots of shows with the Red Cross as acting as props for their purposes. But at the end of the day, they're delaying. The other bottom line, which I think is perhaps even more important strategically, is what is going on with the International Stabilization Force. It's worrying and it's sad that the body of the last Israeli hostage hasn't been returned, but it's equally worrying, I think, that we're not seeing progress, anything real, substantial, when it comes to countries that are going to be willing to actually put soldiers on the ground and fight Hamas. Last point, we can see that the Hamas narrative of peacekeepers who will come will only be as a buffer zone between the population and Israeli forces. That is what Hamas has been saying all along. These messages are now being echoed by the Turkish foreign minister in Doha, and we're seeing that even if the ISF will be implemented, it will probably be something that is far less than what's necessary and not capable of disarming Hamas. So stage 2, lots of big worrying signs before it.
Descendants of Holocaust survivors are now helping ensure Germany's security. 1 minute till the break. Jonathan, your takeaways.
Yeah, stark contrast between what's going on in Doha, Qatar, where the who's and who's of the international diplomatic and business elite are there. Qatar cooperating with a lot of institutions, and sadly, Israel. Thankfully, we have our defense tech, and we use that in diplomacy in order to strengthen our diplomatic situation. But unfortunately, we are far from where we need to be. I agree with the positive points of that Yaki says, but the bottom line is that Israel needs to do much more diplomatically to dig itself out of the hole that we're in. This is a step in the right direction, but much more needs to be done for us to be able to have alliances and more diplomatic power and to leverage our military achievements in a way that is good for the long term.
Jonathan, your take on the strategy that Qatar is employing right now, this global stage, echoing talking points that are, for the most part, anti-Israel, so many nations involved, a range of panel discussions, even talks on anti-Semitism. This is quite remarkable in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's taking cynicism to a whole different level. What the Qataris have been doing for many years is building this forum. And I don't know how much money it cost them to pay for all of the different high-value people who came, but it wasn't cheap. I'm sure they paid a lot in order to have journalists and opinion makers and other people there. And I think that it looks as if they achieved their objective. Their objective is to delegitimize Israel. Their objective is to bolster their own standing as kingmaker and regional power maker. And I think that if you look at the people who participated in the agenda here, lots of Arabs, several Palestinians, some of the more fringe parts of Palestinian society, some less, not a single Israeli. And Israel's voice isn't represented here, and everything here is very much along the lines of Muslim Brotherhood, anti-Israeli, and unfortunately a lot of Westerners who are there as either useful idiots or willful participants in this quest against Israel. And I can only regret that Israel, in this current situation, doesn't have the tools to combat, doesn't have the diplomatic alliances and strength and credit to actually fight back better, and that we are causal, we are only responding to events that are being shaped outside of Israel, and they're hostile to us. Two important points. We can see the slide here. We can see that the narrative of what Hamas wants the international peacekeeping force to be is a peacekeeping policing force, not peace enforcement. No talk about disarmament, and that's something that Hamas spoke about a month and a half ago. Now both the Turkish and the Egyptian foreign minister are echoing those points, and that is very worrying because at the end of the day, if Hamas isn't disarmed, all of this deal, the only thing that it will have achieved is the return of Israeli hostages. And that's no small thing, but that is not what Israel went to war for. And if we are left with that, I think that the clock is ticking for us to go back to war, and a conference like this is not a good sign for what it means in reality for Gazans and for Israelis.
What do you mean by the clock is ticking to go back to war? What kind of time frames are you looking at?
I mean, to me, it's obvious that where reality is going now isn't towards anything that is acceptable for Israel. We're not getting a complete defeat and dismantling of Hamas. We're not getting a de-radicalization of the Gaza Strip. And there's different diplomatic flexibilities that are being used in order to leave Hamas in power and then pave the way to a Palestinian state. That isn't something that Israel, whatever government will have, will be able to allow and agree to. And the only options that Israel will have will be to either take something that will fall far short of what we decided to go to war for, or to change it by using force. And I think every day that goes by and we don't see an international stabilization force, and we see the constant slide in what that force is supposed to be doing, and every day Hamas uses in order to strengthen their control, means that we are moving closer towards going back to fighting, because at the end of the day, Hamas needs to be dismantled. We cannot have this war ending. Whatever they say in Doha and in other places is less important. This war cannot end with Hamas still in place.
Your thoughts, Jonathan, on what he alludes to as Western expectations here?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite striking to see how far the US has moved from once upon a time being not only the leader of the free world in terms of economy, but actually believing that it has an educational role in spreading a type of governance that is, yes, much better than the others. It's imperfect, but democracy with civil rights, with rule of law, I hate to say, benevolent, that's a very, very generous representation of these dictatorships around us. And it is worrying. Maybe he got confused. Maybe he got carried away that he was in Doha. Maybe he sensed the energy in the room, which is Israel hostile. So he felt compelled to, please the crowd. I don't really know what's behind it, but it is worrying. And I think we've seen a lot of rich statements. I mean, a former jihadi terrorist who, yes, definitely killed, butchered civilians, whose ethos was to use violence in order to achieve Muslim domination, which is what a jihadi fighter is. For him to be lecturing anybody and to hear from a prime minister of a Arab dictatorship, Saudi Arabia, lecturing us about what reform is needed in our government, sure, I'm first to criticize my government, but wouldn't take it from a non-democracy. And I think that's really what we could summarize in this forum. A non-democratic country, flush with money, leading global conversation and telling others, educating others, especially democracies, on what should and shouldn't be done. And they have the chutzpah even to call it the quest for justice and to not only talk but actually do. So it's a lot to really to take down.
A lot to digest. Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus, always appreciate your insights. Thank you very much.
So what we see from Qatar is cynicism turned into an art form. Israel fights a war to dismantle Hamas, to protect its civilians, and to free hostages. Meanwhile, Qatar rolls out the red carpet for global elites, spends millions to bring influencers and diplomats, and not a single Israeli is allowed a voice. That's not diplomacy, that's a propaganda theater. We're witnessing psychological warfare. Hamas delays returning hostages, they stage PR shows with the Red Cross, and now Qatar packages that narrative, selling it to Western media as peace. Except it's not peace. It's a buffer zone that leaves Hamas armed, no disarmament, no accountability, zero plan to protect Israelis and Gazans long term. The whole performance is designed to do one thing: to delegitimize Israel and legitimize Hamas. And Western leaders, who should know better, are going along with it. They're letting a dictatorship lecture democracies on morality and governance. That's not leadership, that's blindness. But here's the bottom line that needs to be said clearly. Israel is not going to stop this war with Hamas still in power. Israel didn't go to war just to return hostages. Israel went to war because no civilized nation can survive with an ISIS-style regime on its border. So while Qatar hosts conferences and pats itself on the back, the clock is ticking. Because if Hamas isn't dismantled, if Gaza isn't de-radicalized, then Israel is going to have no choice but to finish what it started. Diplomacy without truth is just theater, and no amount of Qatari money, media spin, or international panels changes that fact. Hamas has to go because real peace is built on justice, not illusions. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.